So I often make these videos because, well, this is an audio, but you get what I'm trying to say. I make these audio podcasts because I actually don't want a moment of virality. I think that going viral is what introduces a lot of different opinions, a lot of chaos, confusion, and that's kind of where your sentiments sort of lose their authority, right? And as someone who does create this podcast with the premise of documenting truth and educating communities, I don't really want to get swept up into a wave of current trendy intellectualism. I also don't want to be swept up into the wave of elite education where they are criticizing anybody who has a desire to learn, and they're tearing down people who are maybe seeking to build a platform, educating communities, even if they're still learning themselves, right? So you kind of have this rise of anti-intellectualism, but it's not really a genuine concern about people being anti-intellectual. It's more so an argument that people may not be able to, I don't want to say articulate themselves, but I think it's more so about people not being able to meet a certain type of criteria. And I think when that argument is coming from African American people specifically, I think we just do one another a huge disservice. I don't know if African American people realize this, but I don't know if I'm African American. I don't know I'm saying that. But for Black people, the people who listen to your content oftentimes are Black people. And so when we're beating up on one another and we have this understanding, at least at a very basic level, that our public school systems fail us, right? And we know why they failed us. We know that, once there was segregation, then there was desegregation. We had to fight for many of our rights. We had to educate our communities. We had to do all these different things. Fast forward, we're in public schools. You got white flight, all these different things, right? We're not passing levies. Programs are being defunded. And this is all going on post-Trump, right? This is going on post-Trump. This is going on since the 50s, right? This has been going on since, we had to fight to learn how to read, right? In the 1900s, we weren't even able to read once slavery, we were emancipated from slavery. And so I don't want to get into dates and times, right? But I will say that it's been a very long journey for African American people and American people really in regards to literacy. I think for the very first time, even those who are educated at elite communities have been given the freedom to be more expansive, right, in their literary studies, right? And so people are starting to read more independently. And in that, people are reading different books. People have niche interests, right? So people are maybe reading books about Pan-Africanism, but they're not reading books about African-American history, or they're reading books about the Native American, or reading books about, you know what I mean? So I just think that when you start talking about anti-intellectualism, there's different forms of education. People can be very knowledgeable in regards to one specific thing, but not knowledgeable about other specific things. Some people are really good at what they do. They may be doctors, they may be lawyers, but they may not be very well versed in regards to relationships and communication skills on a one-on-one type of basis, right? They may not have great interpersonal skills. They may, so it's just the list goes on. And I don't think, for me, at least, that's not my intention, is to beat up on anybody when I'm coming on here to share my thoughts and I'm coming on here to share some of the insights that I've gleaned from culture. I think the other aspect of it too is I'm very curious to kind of see what will take place with the Renaissance Room. I'm very curious to see what will take place just as we continue to move forward. I think with this market, right, in terms of intellectualism, content creators, and this whole thing of academia and education, I'm just more so curious to see what is this going to do. I don't know if this is going to be a market, right, open market within the creator economy for a very long time. I do think that there are some levels of oversaturation, but I think a lot of it is really coming from the need to have pristine production. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I think people want to watch content that's clean, but I also know that with the rise of virality, right, growing followers, growing subscribers, growing audiences, right, greater capital, people are going to start to be a lot more dishonest. There was a content creator who I deeply revered, And I really admire their work and just all the things, right? Things to talk about. And I noticed that they did an interview recently, and I was very much looking forward to this interview when they mentioned this content creator, because this is someone who is very radical, and I really admire this content creator for that, right? There's not too many African American educators, scholars, historians, right? Graduates, whatever, in the creator space that are willing to be more truthful and more forthcoming about our history, about what's going on in present day, about addressing the racial and the ongoing, right, racial violence and the more so racial terror, I think that we can go ahead and call it at this point, about African American people. And so when I'm watching this interview and I notice that it's more so dissected into like a 9-minute video, right? I'm automatically thinking about how the priority was not really to educate people. It was more so to create a video that would generate SEO surge, that would be easy to, you know what I mean, dissect, that would be easy to digest. I'm sorry. It really wasn't about being a thought leader. It wasn't really about educating people. It was more so about how do I kind of stay intact within the creator economy as this African American educator, as this historian, right? But also being palatable enough for my reach. And that's a concern for me. And I said that since day one, right? I've been saying that since day one. I think people who go out here and it's like their content is growing and it's big and they're getting monetized, like I'm happy for them. There's no tea, no shade. But I also know that there are a lot of people who also do this work and they're able to edit and it works for them as well. But I also know that in a lot of cases, with the more audience that you get, like some people are, let me just say this too, right? Some people are really just good at what they do. They're a lot better at this than me, right? They may really have like very sound education in politics and history, right? So they're able to articulate themselves in a way that is not necessarily being palatable to the white audience or to a diverse audience, but it's more so they're able to articulate themselves without this level of radicalism because there's less emotion, right? There's a lot more terminology. There's a lot more language to be able to express themselves in regards to the events and the rage and the racial terror that African Americans have experienced today and in the past, right? And so they do a very good job at that. There are also content creators who are a little bit more radical, and I do think in part for those content creators, not always, but a lot of times I think that there is some element to that, right? And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I say all that to say, I'm just more so curious as to see what is going to happen within this sphere, right? Is this where people are going to come to get their information, right? Are they going to look to, content creators who read books, who come online, who educate communities and things like that? I think the thing about reading, and I think that's probably one of I don't want to say it's my biggest critique, but I'll say my only pushback for a lot of content creators who do kind of enter into the space of like education and intellectualism is that reading actually gives you this very unique ability, not just to understand the past, but to also understand the present and to be able to glean from your own personal insight, right? Glean from your own personal experiences and form an insight that I think is very original. And I don't think we see that a lot today. I think we talk about echo chamber. I don't think it's an echo chamber. I wouldn't really say it's an echo chamber. I think it's more so just like you have a lot of people who produce a lot of really good content, but they're all arriving at the very same points and no one's really pushing the needle forward, right? I don't think that in regards to this, right? I don't think that solutions are, we should just sign off. We should just log off. We should stop being on, like all of that to me is just very redundant. I think it's a little silly because people are not going to stop using social media. I also think the ways in which we are being socially engineered, we don't really have a choice. So I'm very, I don't want to say annoyed, but I will say a lot of the conversations about our usage of social media, AI, all of these things that have been so heavily integrated into society that quite literally it's like, I don't want to say governmental, maybe even federal, like it's federally, engineered into our country, right? Into our society, into the way that we eat and we interact and all these different things. Like that is beyond our control. You see what I'm saying? And so I am a little bit more, taken back, I guess, or I'll say disinterested, right? I'm very disinterested in conversations that talk about just getting offline because that's actually not the solution. And the reason being it's not the solution, like I said, because you don't really have a choice, right? You don't have a choice but to use your phone. You don't have a choice but to engage with AI. Even if I don't want to engage with AI, it is being so heavily integrated within our society that my job uses AI. If I don't want to use the job, then if I want to create something using a graphic design system to edit my thumbnail, AI is there. Okay. And in part, like one of the things I would say about American society is that our foundation is about convenience. It's about need. It's about making the ultra wealthy, the ultra rich, super comfortable. It's about aspirations of a higher class, right? Why do you guys think that so many immigrants come over here and they want to go on America's next top, what is it? Next top, not I said next top model. Oh my God. American Idol, right? Why do they want to go on American Idol? Right? Because the title in and of itself is very telling, but I think it's more so about the aspirations of American society. People from third world countries view America through the media's lens. That's their understanding of American society. And it's why I've actually noticed for myself, just my most recent experiences with immigrants, such as like Arabics, right? And maybe some Muslims too. Like, I'm not exactly sure. It could be from Abu Dhabi. Like, I'm not exactly sure. I will be the first to say I'm geographically challenged, okay? Especially in regards to certain cultures. But I'm pretty sure I think I'm hitting on the mark in regards to this. But I noticed that they have very little regard for African American people. I noticed that I was even telling a relative of mine how I was at the mall, and I just noticed that like a lot of the Indians, like I said, Arabs and in the Muslims and so forth, I was like, I noticed that they don't even engage with me as a Black person. Like, there is no regard for my humanity. There's no regard for my existence. It's almost like they don't look through me. They look past me. It's almost like gum on the floor, right? Like you don't even pay it any attention. And I wonder, where do they get that from, right? Where does that level of socialization come from, where you're dealing with an immigrant who's not American and they're engaging with an American citizen, but they see you as scum of the earth. They see you as trash on the street, right? But like, they want to come here and they want to go on American Idol and they want to be idolized and they want the American dream. They want the material comforts. They want the opportunities that American society offers, right? And you start to question, like, whose aspiration is that? Right? Whose aspiration is that? And so I'll leave you guys with that. But all in all, I wanted to come on and talk about my most recent thoughts just in regards to the things that I've seen online lately. First being, one, I think it's so incredibly scary, like engaging with people in the world today. And I don't mean like fear in the literal sense, because obviously it's false. What is it? False imagination appearing real or something, false evidence appearing real. So I'm not saying fear in like a literal sense. I'm more so like, it's concerning. It's uncomfortable. Right? Very, very uncomfortable engaging with people today, because you don't actually know who is engaging with social media and how social media has warped this person's paradigms, right? Like, I've met some people who I feel like will engage with me as if we are on social media, right? Like, for example, it may be like a white girl who starts using all of these African-American, colloquialisms, and she's like, clock it and all these different things. And it's like, oh, okay, I don't know. Are we having a moment of relatability, or is this more so like, you know what I mean? The way in which you engage with people on social media, right? And I've had moments where there has been this sort of like vitriol, which, first of all, the volatility that white Americans exude in regards to African American people has always been there. I don't think that social media is a conduit. I don't think social media has influenced white people to be racist, so to speak. But I do think that it makes me question what type of like propaganda, what type of, what are they hearing from Donald Trump? What are they hearing from these social media platforms that are encouraging them to behave in this way, right? Is this type of behavior something that should be more concealed in 2026, right? Is this person engaging with me as myself, or is it from something that they just heard on their lunch break? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And that's the thing that scares me about social media. The other thing is, one of the things I'm kind of noticing as I go offline and then I come back online, as you guys know, I'm kind of like back and forth, very, not for a very long time, because I think social media is just so incredibly influential. And it's very, I'm not going to say dangerous, because I don't want to say like danger, but I do think that it's just very impactful. And I try to be very mindful of that, because I think like with it being so impactful, I have an understanding that this is a very powerful tool that can 100% shape my perception of the world. And so I try to be very mindful. I'll just say that. But, I'm sitting here and I'm like, in the recent news, popular stories, things like that, right? And I notice how there are videos that go viral at a certain time, right? A story comes out about a thing, and then there's like a video that goes viral simultaneously, or there's a video that is then put out simultaneously. And if we know that Meta and algorithms are very keen to our most dire, right, or our most innate inclinations, right? These algorithms are tailored in such a way that they know what we think, they know what we want to see, they know what it is to show us that will validate how we already feel or how we already think. It is making me grow a lot more suspicious of videos that go viral, of stories that go viral. We typically have a lot of context when it comes to social media, text, words, images, right? But we don't oftentimes have the reality, right? We don't actually have the truth about a story. And that is very scary, right? It's almost like we're all engaging as journalists without any investigation, right? Without any real evidence. There is no person who is sitting online and deeply researching a story. Because to do that would absolutely require you to go meet a person in person, right, who's been impacted by that story or whose life is being altered by this story, and garner some type of truth in regards to the matter. It requires you to see people face to face. Who is lying, right? Who is using this moment of virality to garner an audience, right? To build a platform, to, you know what I mean? What stories are real and what stories are fake? And that's the thing. And that's kind of like this whole hoax I'm starting to feel about social media that I just don't know anymore. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know a lot of people are starting to question what is real and what is fake. One, we do have to be mindful that Meta got rid of all of their fact-checking databases. So there was the story that kind of went viral shortly after Meta ridded itself from all fact-checking databases. And that's not just Facebook, that's Instagram, that's across all Meta databases, right? And it was a story about the submarine. And there was a story about these rich people who were like billionaires. We don't know who. They were these billionaires who went in a submarine, and the submarine was like, I don't know if it was never found. I don't know if it ever turned up. It was like this moment of virality that got so many people in people. This was sort of like, I don't want to say it was the mark of starting to talk about eat the rich, but there was this lack of empathy that was then imbued within society, and where we started to say things like, okay, well, they're rich. The rich people have nothing else to do with their money and all these different things, right? And got us all in an uproar, created an immense amount of division, and the story was false. It was never real. I think about the most recent story with the young influencer in Tanzania, who was on a trip with her fiance in Tanzania. They were at a resort. They said that she was found hanging. We don't really know. And her family started a GoFundMe, and they were going to go find her and all these different things. And it was I think it was on CBS on YouTube momentarily. I remember going back to that story, and I shared a link about it, right? It was a link from CBS, and the link was gone, right? So CBS had took down the video of this girl and her story. And I started to question in that moment, well, why? My first thought was, okay, maybe they didn't have money to keep it up. Maybe it was some type of advertising to garner some type of awareness. And maybe they had to pay for this level of awareness, right? And maybe they didn't have the money. So, okay, they got rid of the post. But then I started thinking about this current political climate that we live in now, where everything is entertainment, whether it is our lives, whether it is our politics, whether it's our government, right? Like, same thing. And it's just like, it makes it incredibly difficult to trust anything. When America is so incredibly sensationalized, that goes back to what I was saying about the immigrants, right? It is so hard to really decipher, like, who is interacting with you as a human versus who is interacting with you as someone they've seen on the media, as someone they've engaged with on social media. And obviously it's not you specifically, but it's a person who looks like you, an African American person, right? A Black woman, a Black man. And that is the thing that is becoming so incredibly scary about social media. And it's to the point where we really don't have a choice but to engage. There quite literally is no other choice. What started off as a place where we would come and watch a couple funny videos, you know, look at our friends' new editing, whatever they did, you know what I mean, has now become this place that is kind of like a social hub. But once you put the phone down, it doesn't exist, right? And so now you're sitting in your room, you're absolutely alone. Your life is this as it currently stands, right? Your goals, your lack of goals, whatever is in front of you is real. And it is incredibly intolerable. It is insufferable, right? Because it faces you to reckon with the reality that we all get online to avoid, right? It's easy to be online and be the activist. It's one thing to get offline. And what are you advocating for? What changes are you actually making within your community? Right? It's one thing to get online and be pro-Black. It's another thing to get offline and actually have to engage with Black people and all of that racist stuff that you've been taught to believe about African American people, about Black people. Okay, I'm using the terms interchangeably. About Black people is still with you to this day. It's very easy to be, oh, I have Black friends and all these different things, but then you turn around, you get offline, right? You get offline and you're surrounded by a family that is incredibly racist, that is pro-Trump, right? Like, and we say pro-Trump and we act in that to racism because Trump has, look at what he's done to this country. I don't think people realize that leadership absolutely matters. If, let me just go back, right? Under the Obama administration, I'm not saying that there weren't racists who were obviously very upset about that. Yes, because of the foundations of American society and the caste system. They didn't think it was possible. They didn't think it was worthy. Like all these different things, right? Just straight up hatred for the color of a person's skin. But there was also this other element to that we didn't really talk a lot about, was the peace that I think we felt amongst one another as African American people, as well as white people, right? There wasn't this thing of racial tension. It's always been there, but there was not this sort of like embrace and welcoming of it. Under the Obama administration, yes, a lot has taken place, right? People lost their lives. The thing took place at Mother Emanuel. Like, it's all very real. I'm not taking away from the fact that races have existed for the beginning of time, clearly. But I'm more so talking about, there wasn't this thing of like the Klan, right, for the 250th, right? There weren't, white crazy protesters at the White House storming through the front door. Like, all this crazy stuff, like that situation that took place on Capitol Hill, right? That's what I'm talking about. Like, it's just getting to the point where it's like, you have to start looking at the leadership. And if a leader starts to kind of embrace these type of ideologies and starts to encourage this type of behavior, that is what people are going to do. Okay. I know we don't want to think of it like that. I know we want to think that we are free. No, like our leaders absolutely shape how we interact, how we engage, what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not acceptable. I think under the Obama administration, even if the economy wasn't as it is, or it wasn't whatever people want to say about the economy, right? I'm not an economist. People still had a level of hope. People believe that things can get better. People believe that things were getting better, right? And under Trump, now it's very clear. It's almost so evidential that we actually cannot sit here and pretend that things are going to get better. Also, simultaneously, you couple that with a leader who is constantly speaking very hateful things, who is constantly saying things that contradict our realities outside of these social media, okay, outside of these phones. It's going to create absolute chaos. You talk about cognitive dissonance. You talk about delusion. You talk about mental distortion. Right? And that is becoming incredibly insufferable for a lot of people, because you get offline, you put these phones down, and you start to realize that your issues are all there, right? You might have felt high and mighty divorcing your husband. You might have felt high and mighty leaving your wife and stepping off, whatever the case, whatever decision you decided to make that altered the course of your life, right? now you're left dealing with those consequences, and your friends and the community and all these different things that you've built online, those people are just noise. They're nothing at the end of the day. It amounts to absolutely nothing when you start talking about your life and the choices that you're about to have to live with. Do you see what I'm saying? And we've seen this too with, I'm not going to, but we've seen this too with one of the mass murderers, right? At Tops. He's like, he was online watching all this crazy racist right-wing type of media that talked about a white genocide, which is a myth. And he said he was led to go out and kill elderly African-American people who had made it their whole lives, who were pillars to their communities, right? Who made it their whole lives and beat gun violence, right? And it's like, wow. So don't tell me that these phones are like, I think that's one of the things that I hate about Western psychology and I hate about research is that it's so dominant. It is so heavily dominated and saturated by white Americans that there's just not enough nuance. That's why we're not getting new ideas. That's why people are becoming and growing very apathetic about the future. We don't have there's nothing new under the sun in the sense that they're not saying anything new. When you listen to white scholars and white researchers talk about social media and its impact on us, it's always this very like apocalyptic type of thing, right? They talk about it in a way that is so apocalyptic. They never talk about it in a way that is very based on reality, right? How is it really impacting our reality? How is it changing the ways in which we show up, right? There's no introduction to new ideas because you just keep sending all of these rich white kids to Howard, Harvard, Yale, wherever. I said Howard, to Yale, wherever, right? And it's like they're getting the same education. They're getting the same opportunities. There's really no diversity in that. And this is why we had DEI. So that we can help people such as myself, right, who grew up in environments that did not always foster education, did not always have the resources to foster education, did not always have the opportunities for gifted programs. Or let me say this, all right, those programs were very contingent upon two-parent households. It was contingent upon income levels. It was contingent upon, classroom size. Right? All of these sort of like discriminatory factors that didn't give people such as myself a chance. It's not that gifted kids aren't in the ghetto. It's not that gifted kids don't come in black bodies. It's that the programs were underfunded. The programs were cut. Right? And so what happens is you just constantly have this reference of Einstein. And that we never really moved the needle forward. We never really addressed the people who are actually alive, present, living today, living within the society today. When we hear about African-American kids, and, I keep saying African-American, but we hear about Black kids who are doing great things in their communities, who are doing great things within their school systems. We might see them for a moment in time, right? Unfortunately, on an Instagram post, we don't even know if that's real, right? Because it'll be something super crazy like, I don't know, a site just like the Instagram page be like I Heart Hip Hop mixtapes. It's just something weird, right? We might see it on GMA, but we'll never see it again. And this has been historic. So we don't know where these kids go. We don't know if they go off to become researchers. We don't know what it is that they're finding. Word in Black has been a bit of a resource for me, I think, in terms of, education and research in regards to Black communities. But even still, it's such a small thing. It's not enough. Right. And so I say all that to say people need new ideas. And I just don't think that being on social media, reading the same books as everybody else is going to get you those new ideas. Right. I think that people are growing apathetic because there's nothing new that anybody is saying. It's not that we're necessarily it's not that we're echo chamber, but when we're all online and we have these large platforms and we follow people who have large platforms, when they come out and they address a viral moment, right? And viral moments are not just TikTok dances. They are moments where everybody has become aware of a situation that has taken place and everybody's kind of talking about it, right? That's what I mean when I say virality. And they come online and they're sharing the same opinion as everybody else. Not because maybe that's not right and we're not all thinking the same thing, but they're sharing it in a way that is palatable for everybody. And I'm not just talking jargon. I'm talking about what they're not saying. I'm talking about what they're not including in the conversation. I'm talking about how they're not educating people in regards to how a situation like Nolan Wells is not a one-off, right? It's not a one-off. It is a very real reality. We're not talking about the history of Mississippi. We're not talking and I just think that on some level, people are being done a disservice. Like this is not a one off. This is not this is not a neutral situation of like, oh, these are just friends who are not your real friend. No, this is racial terror, and it is ongoing. It is very real. It is very much becoming alive again under this current administration, because that is absolutely what Donald Trump has encouraged. What do you think Hispanics and Latinos are going through? I don't even think it's just Hispanics and Latinos. It's all immigrants. When you talk about mass deportation, you talk about being taken away from your family, being sent from city to city in deportation camps. Some people are being forced to undergo, labor, right? Like, people are being up and sent back to their home country, like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, this is racial violence. This is racial terror. Say it with me, racial terror. Okay. And it has been taking place since the beginning of time. Trump has absolutely resorted back to the very things that a lot of Klan members, which I heard someone say, which I thought was really good. A lot of these Klan members are our judges. They are our judges. They are our attorneys. They are our neighbors. They are our teachers, right? That's why they march and their faces are covered. They got sunglasses on. They got hats on. They got full sleeves, right? They're doing it. Because that's exactly what Trump wanted to appeal to. It's about racial terror. It's to impede the progress of African American people. And if you have an understanding of history, and I think what a lot of historians and a lot of people who come online and do this work, even those with elite educations, are doing a huge disservice to a lot of people and their audiences, is that they're not educating you about the history of racial terror. Hello? Number one, ding, ding, ding. Tulsa, Oklahoma. All right. Tulsa Massacre. That's a good reference point, but there are millions of others, right? This country has done everything that it can to impede the progress of African American people. Black businesses are now booming. So what do they want to do? They want to cut the funding. They stop the funding. They start taking away, first of all, you have algorithms that are pushing out certain things. So certain people's content is not getting pushed for whatever reason. Right? You could say, no, I think it's race probably has a lot to do with that. Right? Prior to that, you got applications on job. I don't want to sit here and I don't want to give point by point, but there are a myriad of ways in which this impeding of progress has taken place. Right? We may not, actually, I was going to say we're not going to be denied the right to vote, but they got rid of that. Right? You show up to a job, you got certain application, you got your application in, you put that you're an African American person, you're not getting a call back. Right? You get your graduate degree, you get all these degrees, and all of a sudden they don't want to hire you. Like, I talked about this a lot, but the reason why so many African American children, the reason why so many Black boys and Black girls want to be in white circles, is not solely because of self-hatred. It is the lack of access and the lack of opportunity that is afforded to them. So as a young person growing up, right, you already have a level of naivete. That is just the reality, right? That is just youthfulness, right? That is the cost of being youthful. You are naive. You don't have an understanding of the world. And I see this with a lot of young people today. I see this with a lot of people in my comments when I talk very real about historical racial violence, right? And racial terror. People want to believe that this is a big, happy world. And that's very understandable, and that's appropriate for a young person. You should believe that there are opportunities that are available to you. You should believe that there are resources that are available to you. You should have this sense of, I can do anything I put my mind to, because growing up in American society, that is the message that we send our young people, right? And so it's not really that. It's that when you're an African American child, specifically a Black boy, your youth is permeated, right? At least in the media, I'm sorry. The depictions of your youth is permeated with violence. It's permeated with gun violence. And so if you're a Black boy who does not resonate with that, you don't resonate with rape culture, talk about it. Okay. A lot of white boys resonate with rape culture. There's a book called Raise a Boy. And I want you guys to take some time to read the book. It's by Emma Brown. It's called To Raise a Boy. It says classrooms, locker rooms, bedrooms, and the hidden struggle of American boyhood. And in this book, she is addressing boyhood, but she does talk about rape. She talks about sexual violence. And it's not just solely about consent and having educations about consent. It's about the normalization of young white boys. And you have this culture of pedophilia. Right. And I can go on and share some thoughts how I feel about it. Come on. Right. But yeah. And so American Boyhood for Black boys, and I don't want to get off topic, I just wanted to give you guys a good book reference. American Boyhood for African American boys is violence, right? That is what is perpetuated by the media. And the media is the very thing that shapes our perceptions of the world. It's why we get online and we feel like we're being attacked when we're dealing with that person in the store, or we feel like we're being attacked. You know what I mean? Because depending on how much usage, right, or how much we're watching the media or whatever, you know what I mean, how much time we're spending with media, it's the thing that's curating our perceptions of the world, right? And so Black American Boyhood is criminality, point blank, period. That is a depiction of it. That is, for the most part, I think a lot of young boys' understanding of it. And so what I think happens is I think that young Black boys whose parents are very intentional about them avoiding, right, this sense of normalization in regards to criminality for them, I think they go about ensuring that they're in the best of the best. They have the best of the best. And so it creates this pseudo sense of privilege that I think really hinders them in the world, because that naivete needs to be protected. They need to know that, unfortunately, we live in a country that has done everything in its power to ensure that you do not have equal opportunity, right? And I need you to be careful when you go out into the world. And I have to tell you about these things because even if these are just your friends and you guys are all 16 or you guys are all 14 and you guys are all 12 years old, right? This is the culture. This is the country. This is the society in which we're living in, right? This is the culture that says these things about us, right? And so we don't have those conversations anymore. And there are many moments, if I had to say that, you know, social media and the viral moments, right, are the things that could be great indicators of how people think. There are many moments where you'll see a white person and they are doing something right with their young white kid, or there's a situation with a young Black kid, and you know there's a moment of innocence, and there's a lot of African American people in the comment sections, and there's his sense of normalization. There's a young white kid who's dancing to a 50 Cent video and it goes viral. Everyone's like, he's coming to the cookout, right? So African American people are very welcoming of people being within their culture, and we've been that way for the longest of times. I think in part it's merely a survival mechanism for us to survive within American society, because we know that racism is very much alive and well. We've been fighting this fight for years, right? And it's not going anywhere. So I think to start to cope, right, with the fact that we've been fighting for our freedom for a very long time now, I think what happens is we start to kind of create these false narratives. And what better way for these false narratives to be imbued within our minds, right, within our society, is through pushing these narratives through social media. It's almost like a fantasy, right? And so here it is, 2026, you have these young people who believe that we're all in this together. We're young, we're having fun. I want to be in access to white wealth, or I want the access that my friends have, even if I don't even understand why they have access and I don't. Right. And this is why, you know, American society has done such a disservice to African American people, and really all American people, and immigrants as well, right, by not educating them on why African American people are disproportionately placed right at the bottom of the economic totem pole. Right. Why is it that even immigrants make more than African American people? Right. Because they have their culture, they have their motherland. They come here and they have 4, 5, 7, 8 people. Right. They come here with grandma. They come here with, you know, right, cousins and aunts and all these different things, and they continue to make a way, and their culture is not obstructed. It is not taken apart. We are not taking people from Israel. We are not taking people from the Congo. We are not taking people from Ghana. We are not taking people from Ukraine and placing them in Wisconsin. Right. That's not what we're doing. We're not breaking these people up. But I do think for the first time, immigrants were starting to see that that is sort of what has taken place within slavery, right? With mass deportations. They're being transported to Venezuela. Some people are being transported to where their family hasn't heard from them in months, right? And I think for the first time, if you're in that system, I don't want to be insensitive, so I want to say this very briefly, and I want to say it with brevity. You can start to kind of understand, I think, what it is to be displaced. And many immigrants have not had that, right? Like I said, American society has, for the most part, welcomed immigrants and their families in mass, right? And so they can come here and they can rent out a, 2-bedroom apartment, and they're all in there together and they're happy because of the idea of American opportunity. And they find themselves a lot more favorable because of the positive stereotypes, right? Whether that's in education, whether that's in work ethic, right? Whatever it may be, whatever contribution, whatever way in which they have been stereotyped within American society, it's typically a positive stereotype, right? So they don't really have a hard time socially integrating within white supremacy. They don't have a hard time socially integrating within American society. And so that's how they're able to climb the economic ladder. And that goes on for generations and generations. And then you look up and you got communities like Los Feliz, right? Where it's a thriving Hispanic community within Los Angeles, right? And you start talking about the gentrification of the Watts, right? Which was at one point in the 80s, like 80% African American people. Fast forward to 2026, and it's like 97% Latino, right? And so that's kind of what it is, right? That's kind of what it is. Now, this is not about Trump and his ignorance about Mexican people taking Black jobs. No, it's deeper than that. It's bigger than that, right? And so that's all I'm trying to make. And I think when we don't talk to young people and there is no education to educate them about white flight, about gentrification, about history in regards to African American racism, segregation, slavery, we had to fight to read, y'all. And it wasn't that we had to just solely fight to read. We also had to build our own libraries. We had to raise money and fundraise to build our own libraries, right? Like everything that African American people have to this day has been fought for. I don't think we realize we even had to fight for like driving. Like we could even drive. There's like a documentary out and there's a book as well that talks about just, driving while Black. And I'm not talking about modern day, right? We got the police pulling you over for no good reason. I'm talking about just driving while Black, what it took. You know what I mean? So it's a big deal when you start talking about the gutting of our Voting Rights Act, right? It sounds like, a little minuscule on the surface, or it may sound even confusing on the surface, but it's a very big deal because if you guys will just look closely, it's only the African American community whose progress is constantly being undone, whose progress is constantly being thwarted, right? At the hands of the American people, by and large, right? You're fed stereotypes that go against people, right? It's like the Asian community, right? You go and put your Chinese stores, you go and put your hair stores in the Black community. Who's your largest supporter? Black people. You think you're going to go and take all that junk up to Beverly Hills? You think you're going to go and take all that junk up to the most prestigious white community? No, they're not buying that. It's like, get this crap out of here. They're going to look at you like a man in a van. You see what I'm saying? But it's like, you guys don't come here. You're not socialized in that way to see us as yourselves, to see us as people who have community back at home, who have been displaced, who've been incarcerated. And it's not even that it's anything of your doing. It's the media's depiction of us. If you can't read as an immigrant, right? If you're not given the opportunity or taking the opportunities, right, for higher education, and even if you are being integrated into higher education and they're not educating you about our history, specifically African American history, you're going to school to be a doctor, you're never going to know these things. You're never going to know these things. And so, yeah, it's 100% shaping how we view the world. And as a young person, if you're starting to believe in a land of equal opportunity, you're starting to believe that, you don't want to be incarcerated, so maybe you can make better decisions, or maybe you're better than the next person, right? You're going to start to believe that you are, and you're going to try your best to not become criminalized. You're going to try your best to not become a product of your environment. You're going to try your best not to be like your cousin Marshawn, right? Or whoever, right? And you're going to find yourself being more open to certain liberal type of ideologies about a certain type of world that doesn't exist. And you're going to find yourself very vulnerable to racism. You're going to find yourself very vulnerable to microaggressions because it is a thing of double consciousness. And it's not even double conscious in the sense of code switching. It's double consciousness in the sense that, okay, I know this white cashier is being very short with me. I know that she's looking at me and she's making me feel very uncomfortable, but I can't quite call her racist. I can't quite pinpoint racial terror. And so I'm going to swallow this. I'm going to endure this interaction with this white cashier, right? And I'm going to move on with my day. But for whatever reason, this has seriously bothered me. You see what I'm saying? That is what it is to be an African American person. And perhaps you go out into the world and your friends, or you may not even have any friends, right? Because many of us are being displaced right now. Many of our communities are being displaced. Many of us are struggling with housing. So I would actually argue that there's been a significant impact on African American communities and the ways in which we're socializing with one another. I don't even really think there has been, simply put, opportunities for our socialization in 2026, because I think that we are so burdened with the laborsome work that has always been there, right? Trying to make up for the lack of economic help or the lack of economic support, rather, from the American economy. We've never had that benefit, despite being the ones who built it and sustained it, right? Through slavery and through our work in the past, right? And so it's like, I don't know. I don't think that everything is this big hurrah like we make it seem, right? You start talking about conversations of shopping and people getting access to car and love. Well, car and love and things like that are credit, right? So if people are getting access to shopping and traveling and going out and having trips, when the Washington Post poll comes out and it starts talking about what are Americans doing, what are young people doing, what are Gen Z doing, well, they're leaving out the silent part. They're leaving out African Americans, right? They're leaving us out because when you have these white editors who go straight through, right, who come from Columbia, they go straight through. Well, I won't say Columbia because New York is a little bit more diverse. I'll give you guys some credit, but maybe not, right? Maybe it's undeserved. And they go straight through and they've not really had any interactions with Black people. And so what do they say? What do they believe about African American people? They believe that we're complainers. They got their friend Kendra, who grew up in the vineyards of California, who's been privileged to go to Columbia, right? And she doesn't talk about her past. She doesn't talk about her father. She doesn't talk about her mother. She doesn't talk about how she grew up, right? Because all of that is irrelevant. She's made it out. She's not going back, right? And so they say, well, the rest of us are just complaining. And so there's really no curiosity. There's no willingness. There's no eagerness to participate in conversations about inequality in any aspect, right? And so when you're having these conversations and you're seeing these things as a young person, you start to think that the world means equal opportunity. And you're seeing these moments where young content creators are going viral. You're seeing these moments where young people are going viral, or maybe even just, you're just too young to even understand all of these complexities, right? But we have to educate our kids about racism. And that is, I'm ending with this, but it is quite literally life or death. It's life or death. This is not a one-off. This is not a one-off. This is not a once-in-a-lifetime thing. We've lost the plot. You know, there is some truth about how trust funds work, right? And they say that there's a generation who works for the money. There's a generation, right? It works for the money, sacrifices for the money, right? There's a generation that enjoys the money. And then there's a generation that grows the money or spends the money. I think that's what it was, right? And so we have to understand that, especially as African American people who are more socially upward mobile, right? Because you are going to have children who are likely going to be integrated into white spaces. I was thinking about today, just as I'm walking around and, you know, I'm in the store and I noticed that there's this young white girl who's old enough, right? We'll say she's old enough, grown enough, not grown, but old enough, right? At least over the age of 16. And no situational awareness. You know, white Americans have this thing, and I notice it's almost something that's innate within them. They look right through you. They look right past you. I'm sorry. Same thing with immigrants. And it's not a thing of a lack of spatial awareness. It's not, them just being kids. It is a very overt, I don't want to say disdain, but it is a level of disregard that I don't think anybody has ever really experienced before unless you've experienced it, right? It is a serious disregard, almost like you are a pauper, almost like you are I don't want to say a peasant because it's something that's a lot more degrading than that, right? It is almost like, I said it before, but it was like you are gum on the floor, right? I mean, it's like, I don't see you. I don't have to regard your presence. I don't have to regard your body. I don't have to regard your bodily autonomy. I don't have to regard the fact that you're standing right here and I'm younger and there's a level of authority here and I can walk around because you're an older woman. I don't have to regard you in any capacity. And it is that lack of regard that has led, white Americans to enslave and to capture and to then further beat and to further restrict African American people from progress. It is that same disregard that has led this administration to, continue to seek out policies that destroy our progress, that obstruct our communities. It is that disregard that is the thing that led to a young man losing his life. And honestly, I don't even want to talk about it here because I think that this situation in and of itself just deserves a level of sensitivity and empathy that I just don't think that our voices, our presence, our commentary through these internet streets could even offer. Somebody literally lost their son who had a bright future, who had a good head on their shoulders, who was not a gang affiliated criminal that you guys like to think of, African American people. This is just a young boy. This is our cousin. This is our brother. This is somebody who was just existing in the world as a young man, you know what I mean? And lost his life due to racial terror. And so I akin it to Emmett Till. It is the same paradigm that has existed with their forefathers, that has been existing within the society, even, millennia later, centennial later, right? Centennials later. And I think if you talk about racial progress, all of the work that white liberals are doing, they will never touch on racism. If you notice that every white liberal, every white socialist, every white left-leaning political spectator, they will never touch on racism. They will never touch on historical racial terror. They will never talk about the white boy who went into Tops in Buffalo, New York and killed all those people. They will never talk about the man who shot up the Bible study congregants and Mother Emanuel. They will never talk about racial terror. They will never talk about the Klan. They will never talk about the racial postcards of Black men and children and women hanging, being sent out. They will never talk about the fact that they stood and took photos and smiled at the death of African American people. They will never talk about Lincoln. They will never talk about the history and the racial violence and the, all of the very gruesome acts on plantations. Instead, they will go to these plantations and they will have weddings and they will tour the vineyard and they will enjoy the scenery and the greenery, but they will not talk about racism. They will not talk about slavery. I think it is all a joke. I think it is an opportunity for white people to have a voice in a society that has already given them a voice. I think it's an opportunity for capitalism. I think it's an opportunity for them to partake in the systems that have always supported them. I think it's an opportunity for white gay men for the very first time to be able to partake in Black women's, to seek to try to emulate Black women. I think it's an opportunity for white people to perform empathy that they've never had. And so those are my thoughts. And I think it's important that we educate our communities as African American people. I want to leave you with that. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to have all the jargon. You don't have to be able to be a scholar. You don't need to be a politician. You don't need to do any of that. I know we get on these internet streets and everybody's the smartest person in the world and everybody's got the toppest degree of the top of the top of the top and everybody done read more than 500 pages a month. 500 books a month. None of that is real. It never mattered within our communities. We always had situational awareness. We always had understanding of how this country has treated us. We've always understood our place within the society. We always understood what it was that we were fighting for. And we need to get back to that. We cannot let our children grow up and not have that understanding, especially for those of us who are upwardly mobile. You have to educate your children on racial terror and racial violence. I don't care. If you see them hanging out with people, you need to educate your children because it quite literally could be their life on the line. Okay? But again, understand how social media it's like I said, that's why I hate all these, white psychologists and researchers, right? They come online and it's all just very superficial. It's not just, social media is warping the brain because our attention spans. Okay, that's boring. We know that. Talk about how it's changing the way we see the world, how we see one another, what we believe is safe when we otherwise would not consider that situation, opportunity, person, place, or thing to be safe if it wasn't for the normalization of such thing being engaged with, right? That we're seeing algorithmically, because it's not reality, it's algorithmic, right? We wouldn't be engaging with that person, place, or thing if our algorithm wasn't encouraging us to do so, right? That's the danger of social media, how it changes your perception of the world, and especially for young people whose perceptions have not already, who perceptions are still growing, right? They're growing. And unfortunately for African American people, because of racial terror and racial violence within this country, and this racial violence that is being encouraged by this administration, encouraged and rewarded, might I add, there's no protection, there's no sanctions for us, right? So we have to be mindful of what we're doing and what we're engaging with and what ideologies that we are adopting. And we do our kids a disservice by not telling them that. They may not want to hear it, but they need to know. They need to hear it. Mississippi has one of the most grotesque histories in regards to African American people, right? Mississippi, baby, I'm scared to go to Mississippi. You know what I mean? I'm scared to go down there. You hear me? Like, it's really bad. And notice how I didn't get into anything. I didn't hit you with no scholarly language. I'm not coming on here with no heavily dense academic jargon. I'm telling you that it's bad. I'm not saying don't go. I'm telling you that it's bad. I'm telling you that sundown towns are real. I'm telling you that Donald Trump is giving these white men the power to go about and act in a certain way. I'm telling you that they're sitting online, they're going on streams, they're committing racial violence acts on social media platforms by calling people, using racial jargon, all these different things under people's comments. They are getting in streams. They're having private meetings. I'm not trying to go off on a deep end here. I'm just telling you the things that I've learned through the course of time about studying the events where racial violence has occurred in 2020 and beyond. Right? They're getting the ideas from somewhere. And now, fast forward 2026, we have a president, a leader of our country, right, who is telling people it is okay for you to do these things. It is okay for you to behave in this way, right? You will not be punished. There will not be any punishment for you. There will be no governmental sanctions that are going to protect African American people from these things. So I'm telling you that as a grown person, freedom was never free. We're still fighting for it. Every single thing. Do y'all know we had to fight to sit on the bus? I know we love to talk about Rosa. We had to fight to sit on the bus. Martin Luther King had to lose his life to be able to have a voice to speak to the people. To be able to speak to the people. We didn't even have an opportunity to speak to the people. Couldn't even speak out loud without losing your life. Man ain't talking nothing about hate. He's talking about love. He's talking about building people up. He's talking about, encouragement. He's talking about inclusivity. All right. The thing that they say they're pushing for while simultaneously pushing you out. So America has always been politically hostile. But when you have leaders who are elected, who are more so populist, right? They're popular. They say common things. They're very catchy. They're people that you like. They're likable. They focus more so on being liked and entertainment rather than being elected government officials who get the job done. Then we're in a dangerous place. We're in a dangerous place. It's scary out here. So that's all I wanted to come on here and say. I wanted to come on here and say, educate the people in your lives. You don't need to be an educator, but you need to educate the people in your lives. I want to remind you guys to continue to make good decisions, right? This is unrelated, but I just want to close with a few things. Like I said, I was coming on to talk about culture, but I want to encourage you guys to continue to make good decisions. I want to encourage you guys to continue to pay attention to the world around you. Don't be so quick to anesthetize your discomfort, because that right there that you're dealing with when you put these phones down, that's your reality. And that's the thing that it's going to take between you and the Lord, all right, to fix. Okay, that's the only person who's going to be able to change your circumstance. Getting online, arguing with people, creating content to try to sell yourself out, creating content that exposes you, creating content that quite literally makes you create almost like an avatar, right? Having a digital platform while neglecting your real life responsibilities is never going to be a flex. I'm never going to encourage that. It's not cool. Things are very hard right now. Things are very tight right now. You need to be on some level employed. I don't care what nobody say. Do the content on the side, right? If you're neglecting your responsibilities, if you are not moving forward with your life, if you are not working hard to try to improve your situation, if you are not praying without ceasing, to improve your situation, we have a problem. We have a problem, right? You don't want to be so anesthetized and so imbued in social media because it's not real, right? It's not real. You can meet people in real life, but your circumstances, like you can be whoever you want to be online. But in the real world, who you are is who you are. So I just wanted to get on here and say that. Peace.